Hello, hi, and welcome to another Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction 2026 video. This is video number 11, so we're very close to the end. The end is in sight. So I've only got one more book to read from the long list, which is kind of looking like I might actually get done before the winner is announced next week. This video is about a book that didn't make the shortlist, but one that I still rather enjoyed nonetheless. And this video is about Edenglassie by Melissa Lucashenko. So, Edenglassie, what did I think? So Edenglassie for me, pretty much throughout most of the novel, was 4 stars. Until I got to the last couple of pages and I had a bit of a tear in my eye, especially at the last page. And when a book is having that kind of emotional effect on me, you know, it has to be appreciated. You know, I have to give some appreciation to the author for their storytelling, for their writing, and for the story that they've opened me up to. It really was unexpected, I must admit, because there were parts of the novel that maybe I didn't enjoy as much as others, but when it was kind of all interwoven together, especially the last couple of pages, yeah, I don't know why. I was just reading and I suddenly got hit with this wave of emotion. So Edenglassie is a tale of love, loss, belonging, colonialism, and I think it's kind of perfectly summed up in a part from early on in the novel, which I'd just like to read to you now. And it says, "The thought consumed him with wonder. It made him feel small, yet at the same time as though he belonged in a universe of meaning, part of a web of ceaseless and sacred connections across thousands of generations." And yeah, that's kind of sums up quite beautifully the story of Edenglassie. We are transported through time between 2 time periods. A lot of the story is taking part in 1854, 1855 in Edenglassie, or Brisbane, Australia. And the other part of the story, I'd say maybe a third, takes place in 2024, still in Brisbane, but we're looking at how these 2 stories are interwoven together. So being set in Australia, especially Brisbane, and being written by an Australian writer who is of Guri heritage, which is like Aboriginal heritage, you can expect some really authentic language in here, which, as someone who is not native to Australia, didn't understand at all. But you know what? When I'm reading stories like this, I put everything into it. You know, I don't want to disrespect the author in any way or the story that's being told. So there are actually words that I did look up to understand fully more what I was reading. When maybe, you know, a couple of years ago, I would have just glanced over these words and carried on without maybe having a better understanding of what I was reading. So to enrich my reading experience and give respect to the author and the story that they were trying to tell, I did look up certain words. So like there's, at the beginning, they talk of the pullum, and that is like almost like a ceremonial gathering of tribes, or a tournament of such, like where our young protagonist that we meet in 1854 goes to not prove his manhood, but you know, when a boy is becoming a man, they go to this tournament to prove themselves, and they have to do a number of ceremonies before they are welcomed as a man. There's also other terminology as well, such as the word Jalgani, and I don't know if I pronounced that wrong, so I'm sorry if I have, and that translates to like an Aboriginal woman. So these little words I was just looking up as I was going along, just to really enrich the experience, and I really do think it made a difference and maybe appreciate the story more. So as I mentioned, a lot of our story is placed in 1854, 1855, and we start by meeting a young boy, 15 years old, Mulanyin, and he wants to impress his tribe. He wants to show that he's a man already, and he desperately wants the respect of his tribe and to be viewed as a man. But that also means respecting their traditions, and their traditions are that at these pullums, tribes get together and they decide, you know, which boys are going to marry which girls from which tribes, and this isn't just something that's done, you know, off the cuff. This is planned a couple of years in advance. So if he wants to prove he's, you know, become a man, then he will marry who he's told to marry, or a girl from a tribe he's told to marry from. This is demonstrated really well in the novel when it says, the ancient spiderweb of obligations and restrictions bound all Gories together, protecting their civilization but suffocating him, and stopping him from running to the lovely girls on the ridge. The beautiful girls were still staring at him and giggling behind their hands. Mulanyin resented the chafing bonds of the law. So further on in the story, we meet Nita, who is a young Aboriginal girl, and we learn that she was taken from her family quite young, about 8 years old, and she was taken into almost slavery until a white family in Brisbane bought her freedom-ish. So she still worked for this white family, but they were respectful. They gave her lodgings, they gave her food, and they treated her as part of the family. It's just she worked for them. She wasn't a slave as such, but she did work for them. And this young girl, Nita, she's from a different tribe, but as I say, she now lives with this white family. And we get to a stage where Mulanyin and Nita meet, and it's this instant connection. Unfortunately, that instant connection decides their fate as the novel goes on. As I mentioned, we also have some of our stories set in 2024. And in that story, we meet a very elderly Aboriginal woman who is like the elder of Brisbane, the oldest Aboriginal woman in Brisbane. She's 103, apparently. And yeah, this is Grandma Eddie. And she has a fall one day and is taken to hospital. And in the hospital, she's cared for by Dr. Johnny. And we also meet Grandma Eddie's granddaughter. So all her siblings and her own children have since died. And so her granddaughter, Winona, comes to kind of take care of her, look after her. And Dr. Johnny falls in love with Winona. And we see how Grandma Eddie and Winona's story is interwoven with Mulanyin and Nita. And yeah, it's very interesting, quite unique. I did find some of the modern day chapters maybe a little bit grating, and I don't know if that's because of the character of Winona, but kind of when I'm reflecting on that, I think that's how it's meant to be. She's meant to be a bit grating. She's obviously of Aboriginal descent, heritage, but she hates everything white, all white people. She thinks they're all, they've all stolen her land. She's very derogatory about white people. But it's her grandmother who kind of settles her down and says, that's not what we're about. We're not about hating people. We're about all living things. And yeah, it soon turns Winona's frame of mind, if you like. It's about Winona's own growth and story of how she goes from being this young woman full of hatred almost to having a better understanding. So yeah, I enjoyed the 1854, 1855 parts of the story more, and because there's more of that, yeah, it was quite enjoyable. And I didn't mind the 2024 bits, and especially at the end when it did all come together. I was kind of all over the place when it was coming together, thinking, is this the best way to bring it together? Is this a bit clumsy? But at the end of the day, when I've got a tear in my eye on the last page, I can't really deny that emotion. So yeah, my head is still spinning, but I can't deny having that emotional attachment to that story. And I think it is an important story to tell, especially the one of colonialism, how people were treated, how their maybe histories and their stories have been sort of forgotten about, or more likely dumbed down and hushed, brushed under the carpet almost. We as especially white British people don't like to think that our ancestors could ever have been like that, have treated people like that, not just in Australia but also in the US when we went over there, and other places as well, India. I won't go on, but yeah, we don't like to see ourselves as brutes who would have treated people like that, but the reality is that happened. And yeah, stories like this are quite important to hit home. It's not to blame us now, we are not like that now, but it's to appreciate that did happen, and this is their story, these people's stories, and it's important not to forget that. So I do take that on board, and yeah, that's why I feel it is quite an important story to tell, and maybe that's why I had that emotional connection to it as well. It really got me, and I have to take my hat off to Melissa Lucashenko for that. I love hearing sort of traditional stories like that coming from someone who has you know, that background, that heritage, who obviously has a lot of connections to that heritage and is putting their heart on the page basically. So I really did enjoy that part of it, which, yeah, I find really strange because a lot of the way through the novel it was a 4-star for me. I was enjoying it, enjoying parts more than others. But yeah, the way it wound up together, I just can't deny how I felt when reading that last page. So that is my thoughts on Edenglassie. I've only got one more book to read now from the long list, so I'm going to try and get that done before the winner's announced next week, and that is The Artist. So I'm going to start on that tonight. Have you read Edenglassie? What did you think? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye.